الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين. أما بعد, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala advises us in His glorious book in Surah Al-A'raf in chapter 7 in verse 8. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والوزن يومئذ الحق فمن ثقلت موازينه فأولئك هم المفلحون. And the weighing of deeds that day, on the day of judgment, will be the truth. So those whose scales are heavy, it is they who will be successful. Now in this life, people use many different measurements to gauge each other. You know, what do you look like? How much money you have? What position you have? What power do you have? These are all worldly measures that when you have to estimate somebody, you know, normally people, that's the first thing they go to. Oh, somebody's tall, somebody's handsome, somebody's, you know, wealthy. So these are all measures that people use in this life. But with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, there are only two measures that are of any importance. Everything else does not matter. The only two things that measure are knowledge and good deeds. So the first verse in Surah Al-Mujadila in chapter 58, part of verse 11, Allah says, يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. Allah will raise those who have believed among you and those who were given knowledge by degrees. So when you have faith, the next thing is how much knowledge you have. That in the eyes of Allah distinguishes your rank from others. You have, you know, you're a scholar, you have a very high status. So knowledge is one measure that Allah uses. And the other one is in Surah Al-An'am in chapter 6, verse 132. وَلِكُلٍّ دَرَجَاتٌ مِّمَّا عَمِلُوا وَمَا رَبُّكَ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا يَعْمَلُونَ. And for all are degrees, meaning positions resulting of what they do. Means whatever you do raises you or lowers you in the eyes of Allah. And your Lord is not unaware of what they do. So your status with Allah, if you want to gauge yourself or gauge somebody else, Allah does that. But if you want to gauge yourself, then it's directly your status with Allah is directly proportional to your knowledge and your good deeds. Of course, with faith, you have to have faith. That's not in question here. So the more knowledge you have, the more status you have. The more good deeds that you do for the sake of Allah, the more status you have with Allah. So this is the only two measures that the Quran mentions as distinguishing, people. And success in this life and in the next depends on whether we use Allah's scale or the worldly scales in this life. If you're going to go in and use the worldly scales, you're going to lose. But if you use Allah's scale, then you're going to benefit in this life and in the next. And the verse says, وَالْوَزْنُ يَوْمَئِذٍ الْحَقِّ. Allah's scale is not only just, it is justice in itself. That's Allah's scales. That means everything that you do will be judged with, there is no more accurate scale than Allah's scale. You will not lose with Allah. Allah knows exactly what you're doing and knows exactly the value of your knowledge and your good deeds. So Allah's scales are very sensitive. And Allah says, فَمَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ. So the first thing in this mawazin is plural. You have many scales. But Allah says, فَمَنْ ثَقُلَتْ. Whoever, the scales are heavy. So if you're going to weigh a car, you're going to use a different scale than if you're going to weigh gold. The scale for gold, you have to turn off. If you have a fan, you have to turn it off because it'll register. It's so sensitive. But go take a scale that you weigh cars on. You can stand on it. You won't even register. So Allah says you have scales. Depending, every action and every person has a scale specific to that because Allah is just. So every action has its own sensitive scale in Allah's perfect justice. Dutiful to parents has their own scale. Treatment of spouses and your children have their own scale. How you behave at work has their own scale. It's not just one scale. Every behavior and every person has their own scale. You give $1,000 in donation. The person who's a millionaire has a different scale than a person who only has $2,000 to his name. They're not the same. The scales are not the same. It's not one scale. So with Allah, you have every person has their own scale and every action has their own scale. And they are very sensitive. Very sensitive. So with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He gave us many scales and many measurements and many instruments that we can use in this life to make sure that we stay on the straight path. He gave us an intellect. The intellect is a scale. When you use your mind, it guides you to the right behavior. You treat others like you would want them to treat you. That's when you use your intellect. You don't go hurting other people because they're going to end up hurting you. So you use the mind, the intellect is a scale. Fitra, your innate nature, is a scale. If you do something bad, your nature is going to tell you you did something bad. You're going to feel horrible. You're going to be depressed. When you do something good, you're going to be happy. You're going to be cheerful. That's fitra, is a scale that Allah gave you so you can gauge whatever you're doing, whether it's right or wrong. Prayer is a scale. When you pray, you want the closeness to Allah. Go do something bad and see if you can have khushu' in your salah. You can never have khushu' in your salah if you're not steadfast. In order to have this closeness to Allah when you pray, you have to be steadfast. You have to follow His orders. You cannot be hurting other people. That's a measure. If your prayer feels to you like it's mechanical, you're getting nothing out of it, then you need to investigate what are you doing. What is missing? Your prayer is telling you there's something wrong. So these are scales that Allah gives us in this life that we can measure what we do. And these scales get more sensitive with faith. The more faith you have, the more sensitive those scales are. Once you have a high level of faith, if you said something, maybe nasty to your brother, and you broke his feelings. If your faith is high, you're going to feel horrible. You're going to feel like as if you committed a crime. And maybe you just said a bad word or just gave him a dirty look. That's what faith does. It makes the scale sensitive. People that don't care about faith and don't care about anything, they hurt and kill people and they don't even blink an eye. So that's how the scales work. Problems with the weighing, when you're weighing something, if you make a mistake, you're not going to repeat it. But if the problem is in the scale, then every measurement that you use it for is going to be wrong. And this is the difference between making a mistake and having the wrong creed, the wrong belief, the wrong knowledge. There is no person that's ignorant. Every person is filled with information. The question is whether it's all the right information or the wrong information. If you're filled with the wrong information and using that as the scale that drives your actions, then every action that you do is going to be wrong because your scale is wrong. You're not using Allah's scale. So we have to make sure that we do not use the worldly scales, but we use Allah's scale. Use Allah's scale when you choose your own spouse. If you marry your children, use Allah's scale. If you want to choose a business partner, you want to go to business with someone, choose Allah's scale when you choose whether you should do it or not. Because if you use worldly scales, you're going to lose, and you're going to lose big. How many people, we all know it. How many people have chosen a rich suitor for their daughter, even though they knew he doesn't pray and his faith is kind of shaky? You think that's going to be blessed and you're going to You're going to lose because you did not use Allah's scale in your decision making. You did not put knowledge and good deeds and faith as the primary one, and not how much money they have, or are they connected, what family they're from, what race they're from. These are all worldly measures that don't matter. If you rely on those, you're going to lose. If you choose your business partner because he's smart and not because he is a God-fearing, you have to be smart, but he has to also be God-fearing. If you don't do that, he's going to lead you to haram. Because a person like that with, light, Islam light, is going to see no problem with taking, usury, or taking, bad income. You don't want to get in business with people like that. So you have to use Allah's scale and Allah's measurements when you move about in this life. And the worst scale you can ever do and adopt is the double scale. It's good here, but it's not good here. There is no such thing as a double scale in Islam. And I give you an example. If you say you work in a business and you need somebody, your worker is, let's say, 20 years old, and you have a son who's 20 years old, and your son come to lift a heavy box. No, son, just sit. Abdullah, come, you lift it. It's good for your worker, but not good for your son. That's a double scale. You should never use a double scale. A believer does not use a double scale. What's right is right every time, in every place, with everyone. There is no such thing as, it's okay here, but not okay here. No, do not use the double scale. So Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala gives us the KPIs. The key indicators, as we move about in this life. Every action is weighed with Allah according to its intention. So these are the KPIs. You want your scale to, your deeds to weigh with Allah. Here's the KPIs. First one is intention. You do the intention for Allah, not to be recognized by others and achieve fortune and fame or whatever. No. You may get that indirectly, but the intention is the first thing. Is the intention good? Good. The size and depth of the action. The longevity of that deed. And how far-reaching is the impact. These are all KPIs that when you embark on doing something, you have to consider. You may feed a hungry person, but if you help him find a job and feed himself, that's a better action because it has a bigger size and depth. You didn't just feed him once. You showed him how to support himself. So these actions are not the same. One is better than the other. One person may build a tent for a convention, and another person may build a university. The university is better because it's long-lasting. The impact of it affects many more people over many generations. So that's a better one. So as you pick, what should I do? Pick the the ones that have longevity and has impact on the most amount of people. So these are the measures. You can give a lecture about Islam, but it's better to build a masjid and a school and things that are perpetual, that help people over and over and over. The wealth of knowledge that some of these scholars left us, you open the Qurtubi, the explanation of the Quran, you open, certain books of Sunnah. The people that wrote them left us hundreds of years ago. They left us this wealth of work that lasted hundreds of years and affected millions of people. Focus on work. When you have to do something, focus on its longevity, on how effective it is, and how perpetual it is for your own sake. And we have an opportunity tonight, inshallah. We have a little mini gathering about building our next masjid. And I encourage you to stay after the khutbah, inshallah, after the prayer, inshallah, and maybe sign up to attend. But building a masjid is one of the best things that you can do, because it may last hundreds and hundreds of years after you're gone, after you are no longer here. It could be getting you perpetual rewards. And that's the type of deeds that you want to focus on, not putting at $20, but see if you can produce something that benefits humanity. And I'm not singling out masajid, orphanages, hospitals, anything that benefits humanity, whether it's physical buildings, whether it's knowledge. That's what we have to focus on. If you want your status with Allah, you have to always consider knowledge and good deeds. The more knowledge, the more good deeds, the higher your status with Allah. So let's, inshallah, use Allah's scale to guide us through our actions and not use the worldly ones. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.